And you are live.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Affordable Housing and Community Equity Development Commission meeting, September 23rd, 2021. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call of the commission members. Kathy Ebner, Chair, I am here. Nancy Lispin, Vice Chair.
I'm here.
Terry Bond, Commission Member.
I'm here too.
Pat Sheridan, Commission Member.
Here.
And Teresa Wellman, Staff Liaison.
Here.
All right. So we have a quorum and all members are present. We'll start with, I have the agenda up on the screen, and we're going to start with the approval of the July 22nd, 2021 meeting minutes. Hopefully you'll have had a chance to read and review the minutes, and unless there's any discussion or correction, happy to entertain a motion to adopt.
I move that the minutes be adopted as written.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, minutes approved. Okay, so we have a few discussion items for us this evening, and so plenty of work to consider on our part, that's for sure. Teresa and I worked to put together the agenda and really found that we really do have quite a few topics to address, but wanted to zero in on these four to begin with. Starting with the proposed Annapolis Housing and Community Redevelopment Corporation. So Pat, we are reading, we read in the paper, at least I have, Capital Gazette, about HACA's plans to form a new redevelopment entity, and understand that you are the lucky one to be the proposed chair of the new entity. And so since that involves directly, housing related matters, and the city would really appreciate hearing from you a little bit more about, HACA's plans and the purpose of the new organization.
Sure. Well, first of all, we try to find a name practically as long as this commission's name. So I'm going to have a hard time remembering all the parts of it. But anyway, yes, the concept was that, Housing Authority formed this nonprofit 501c3 to be able to do primarily two major functions. One is sort of a traditional function that a lot of housing authorities do, which is have it as a total redevelopment authority that would partner with other organizations to do redevelopment, such as some of the RAD projects, but also could do projects on its own for that matter. I'd had some experience in my past job working with entities that were part of other housing authorities in other states that did mainly their redevelopment work through those entities, and whether they used a partner or not wasn't really a major function, but it does allow them to access some funding that they wouldn't normally get. The second piece is around funding, and as the executive director explained, one of the things that they find they can't always do is access funds from different organizations because they're not a 501c3 organization as a housing authority, nor are they necessarily a full-blown governmental entity too. So a good example of that is that TD Bank just came out recently with a grant program for nonprofits to use for services in affordable housing. And that would be the type of grant that the Housing Authority 501c3 could apply for, that it can't as a housing authority itself. So it actually should open up some new avenues to make more funding available, but also to make it easier to do development work on some of the RAD projects, but also on other projects they may decide to take on. The board of HACA has approved it. It's currently in process as far as, filing the paperwork and getting the nonprofit recognized by the state at this point. So I understand it's probably going to be another 30 to 60 days before it's actually official, but that's the status as of right now.
Will it have staff or is it?
No, no assigned staff to it right now, and the board members and officers of the nonprofit are the same as the commissioners on the housing authority. So there's no, the complete overlap between the two organizations as far as governance goes right now.
And is that the idea long-term, that there would be that overlap, or?
I can't answer that question. I think that there might be some opportunities there to bring in some non-housing authority commissioner board members, which is not uncommon with a lot of organizations when they set up nonprofit boards.
And would it, I mean, if they are totally coterminous, that would mean that Melissa is essentially the staff of the redevelopment corporation, and any of her quote unquote development staff. Does she have any?
She has one that I know of. But other than Melissa and her development director, that would be the prime staff on HACA's team that would be working on the nonprofit.
So in all likelihood, if they would seek and receive some sort of funding for something, they could create actual staff positions that are different.
No, I think that's totally doable. Certainly when I was at Volunteers America, we were able to get grants from organizations like MacArthur to be able to build capacity on staff.
Right.
Do that type of thing. So
it would seem that would be advisable given the scope of the work that has to be done at the housing authority, as well as anything that this new corporation might undertake.
Right.
But the idea that this entity would not be taking on HACA's work, right? This would be separate, correct?
The way I understand it, a good example would be Robin Wood or Eastport Terrace Harbor House, is that they could delegate to the nonprofit the authority to actually act as the developer on behalf of HACA. Now that would still mean they would end up, in all likelihood, partnering with a nonprofit or for-profit partner that is a experienced developer with capacity, but it would be the entity that would enter into the partnership as opposed to HACA directly.
So we've talked in the past about the concept of a land trust. We received a briefing from the Housing Affordability Task Force, 10-point plan. And, one of those 10 points is the idea of formulating a land trust. Did this come up in conversation relative to the creation of this new entity, Pat? Was it envisioned that this entity would be able to possibly take on activities of a land trust?
It hasn't come up specifically, but I agree with you that there's a possibility it could.
It's interesting it hasn't come up because from the task force, it was actually Melissa who introduced the concept of land trust and pushed it for the commission. So I would assume that she has that in the back of her mind.
Yeah, and we did talk then in Charleston. She had done that similar kind of work. And Teresa, I think last time when we had this discussion about the land trust, we did bounce around the idea of possibly inviting Melissa to one of our future meetings.
Right.
And when they start redeveloping Harbor House and Eastport Terrace, theoretically, all that land is a land trust.
Right.
So, I don't know how the mechanisms of it would work, but, has anybody heard any dates from HUD as to maybe when they'll announce choice neighborhoods? Pat, have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything in board meetings at HACA. They're still waiting. I think they were hoping to hear late September, October.
Okay,
Yeah, because, I think that if this entity, if it's possible that this entity could serve in that capacity by holding land in a land trust, essentially, right? Because that needs to be, I think what we discussed last time was it's a nonprofit and preferably a CHODO. Is this entity going to be a nonprofit formed as a CHODO? Do you know, Pat?
That hasn't come up at all. And it's kind of interesting because I think I've seen less emphasis on CHODOs from some of the HUD funding streams.
Okay.
So, that may be, a type of entity that doesn't get as much funding in the future.
Mhm. Yeah, because we were talking about a CHODO set aside with the home dollars,
Mhm.
right? And I guess that's something we should explore, whether or not that's still the case. I'm not even sure.
well, aren't DHCD's funds, for home funds, because city doesn't get home funds, but
Uh-huh.
don't they give their home funds only to CHODOs?
I think the rules on, and again, I don't know them well enough to, to be an authority on this, but my understanding was a portion of home funds do have to go to CHODOs.
Yeah. That's
but
what it's a portion of.
I think this new legislation that's in front of Congress right now, they're de-emphasizing the amount of money going to CHODOs going forward.
Okay.
Right, but
Got
in the state gets home funds, and they made a decision. The cities used to be able to apply for home funds for projects, like we did one on Clay Street, settlement costs for those 10 row houses that we Habitat did. But then they decided at some point that they were only going to give those competitive funds to CHODOs. So I'll have to check on that and see if that's still the case.
Yeah, I think, as I recall, that there is a required percentage, and then the state or the entity who receives the funds can decide if they want to provide more funds to CHODOs.
Right.
Okay.
It was a
Well,
long time ago.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have, if Melissa can set aside the time to, I think it would be great for us to have a conversation with Melissa, Pat, whenever you think that timing might be right, in terms of the intent, of this, of this new entity and her specific ideas about the various kinds of activities that it will undertake. And then we can, really maybe dig in on this idea of the land trust concept.
Well, what's going to depend too on whether or not the housing authority gets choice neighborhoods.
Right. Although, and then one thing that we have discussed in the past is the idea of possibly the city setting aside any land that they may have. And putting it into making it perpetually affordable through a land trust structure. And of course, what comes to mind is the Public Works site on Spa Road.
Yeah.
Right, where that site currently exists, because we are aware that DPW is constructing a new facility on Hudson Street and will be vacating the where they are now. And so I do have a map of that parcel, and let me see if I can pull this up. Mark, do I need to stop sharing to pull up something else? Or can I just,
It's easiest if you do that.
okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the agenda and then I'm going to share this map. Okay, can everyone see that?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this would be the idea, right? And again, this idea stems from the task force report, housing affordability task force report. One of their big ideas was that the city, take any vacant land that they may have and put it into a land trust that can then be developed and remain affordable in perpetuity. And again, that entity needs to be a nonprofit. And since HACA is talking about creating exactly that, it just seems like the two ideas go together. So the parcel with the red dot is 15 acres of land that the city of Annapolis owns, where the public works was at one point. And, now we know that they're over on this other part, they're operating out of this smaller other parcel across the street, Spa Road.
They're still operating. They're still operating on that big parcel too. I think it might be the opposite, that they're not operating the other side of the street now. I think.
Well, I went to pick up a new recycling bin and that's where I went, to this other side.
Oh, you're
smaller
right.
side.
You know what? I'm doing the wrong north-south. I know you sounded
Yeah.
wrong. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, the recycling, there's operating on this with the small,
Right.
from the small parcel.
Apologize.
So I was able to find in SDAT the information for this parcel. That's how I know it's 15 acres. And, the SDAT information has its assessed value. I don't remember what it is right now. But it was interesting. I tried to find the smaller parcel in SDAT and I wasn't able to. Traded some emails with Sally Nash, and apparently it's labeled unknown in SDAT, although the city does own the parcel. So I don't have any information about how big it is. Or its assessed value. But, I gotta believe that with DPW vacating this area, this land is surplus and the city is at a crossroads of deciding what to do with it. And I think that if there is a potential for it to work hand in hand with HACA's new entity, then that's something the city ought to explore.
I thought, and I might be wrong, that the mayor was actually trying to do some special group looking at ways to develop it maybe 2 years ago. Am I wrong, Teresa? My memory tells me there was some task force working group. So I guess there's some history at looking at how to develop it as well.
No, I think the task force that you're thinking about is the one that was for Forest Drive when they were thinking about putting the public works building there. There was a task force for that piece of property, but I don't recall a task force for this piece of.
Well, I'm not even sure if it was a task force, but it was a working group. I thought.
Yeah, there was a big working group for the Forest Drive, a very large working group for the Forest Drive.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't about developing this site. Maybe I was wrong.
Well, I participated in that task force, the DPW one. And so there were conversations, Terry, at the time about once that Spa Road site becomes vacant. Actually, the conversation, as I recall, was about this parcel being developed by a market rate developer.
That's what I thought. That's what I
Right.
remembered. And I remember at the
But
time, I
then-
was shocked that they would do that and not use it for affordable housing.
But at the same time, there was also conversation, okay, we're going to let the for market developer, do this. And then there turned out to be environmental issues, and that's why it sort of fell apart. But at the same time, they're talking about doing this, they were also throwing out the idea of developing, this is what I recall, affordable housing for working artists. And I don't know how that ever, I don't think that ever got vetted. I'm not sure that it was ever penciled out, but that's what I'm recalling, that there was some idea about allowing market rate here and then having these working artists, affordable
Well, that
community
makes
develop
sense.
there.
They're close to Maryland Hall.
Yeah. But
I
nonetheless,
mean, I don't know that it makes sense, but you can understand what they're doing, what
Right.
they're thinking about.
Yeah, and I recall one point, the larger parcel, there was some discussion about, parceling off a piece of that to use for athletic fields to more or less adjoin what's already there.
mhm,
So frankly, I think if we'd like to suggest that the parcel be used for affordable housing, we better get our placeholder in there pretty quick.
yeah, that's right. That's what I'm thinking also. And Teresa, do you know where the city is on their decision making or the process relative to that? And
No, I don't.
okay.
The last time I asked was, they hadn't made any kind of decision about it at this point.
Well, it seems to me that if they're serious about wanting to do something in terms of affordable housing, after they had the task force and it made recommendations, that they at least would entertain proposals and thoughts of it and give some kind of an answer. I mean, it seems
Yeah.
to be the way that the city could actually get behind something, as opposed to just letting the report sit out there and for no good reason.
Right. Well, don't forget there's an election going on, and
Well, that's
so
right.
things kind of all come to.
Nothing's going to happen.
Nothing's going to happen until January.
Nothing's going to happen until
really.
after that.
Yeah. So.
But I think, but to Pat's point about, getting in line,
Yeah.
I think we should, I would like us to see, making a recommendation that the city, consider that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And, at least we can, put it in writing and, they'll have it. And,
And
maybe
it's Kathy, it sure fits in with your write-up where we talk about how little land there is available
Right.
for development, and here the city owns this piece. So it's like, you got to do something. This is where you can begin.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And the time, again,
There is the issue about the gas station there at the corner that will
well,
have to be cleaned up at some point, but that happens all the time, so.
Yeah, they're going to have to remediate or whatever
Yeah.
environmental issues that are over there before they do anything.
Right.
So Kathy, can I just ask you, in the meetings, did they ever talk about how much of that parcel is actually developable? That's the thing, when we have a 15 acres on the site, but what's on that land, the slope, everything would be a question of how much is actually developable. That would be.
yeah. I could probably find the old plans that were put together by the developer. But again, that this environmental issue popped up. I think the thought was that what was there could be remediated, and then it was discovered that it was a bigger problem than originally envisioned. So, and that's why it
was all scrapped.
they pivoted, and scrapped it. So, but good question, Terry. You're right. But anything's better than nothing, right?
Oh, yeah. And maybe even, the density and everything may not work for, for a profit developer, but, free land for a nonprofit developer is free land. So
That's right. That's right.
And one thing that we really need are some home ownership opportunities for affordable
And-
home ownership.
Right.
opportunities.
Right.
And that fits, very nicely with the
Yeah,
land
that's
trust
that's
structure.
what's been. I mean, if you drive down Spa Road, every other minute there's a new townhouse development. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but there are everything that's been built along Spa Road in the past several years has been the townhouse communities, expensive townhouse communities.
Right.
Okay. Well, then we'll do that if everyone's agreeable. We'll, just do a very brief, short recommendation that, the city take that into consideration. And at least, we've done our part by raising it early and bringing along conversations. And then as a next step, if Melissa's able to join us, I think that would be very helpful. And we can even talk in terms of, maybe more specifics about that idea.
Yeah, would you like to have me ask her? And we have a board meeting coming up Tuesday.
Good.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Teresa, do we have a formal way that we communicate with the city in a situation like this? Is there something, is that something that we are in a position to do? Or is there a formal way that we do that sort of thing?
I would have to find out because
Okay.
the Housing and Community Development Committee, when it had 3 aldermen on it, So
Yeah, so there was
it was a different,
and
yeah.
Right.
So it was a little different. So they would do legislation basically if they wanted something. So I would have to check with Sally and find out what the protocol would be for this because
yeah,
it's a new
I mean,
thing.
it's one thing to write a letter, but the question is to whom? And-
Right.
and-
No, and I can find all that out from Sally.
okay.
I'll double check that.
All right, sounds like a plan. Great. So discussion item 2, payment in lieu of taxes. So we've talked about this previously and just wanted to have sort of a brief kickoff discussion about this. And what we talked about previously was the fact that the city does not have a formal policy relative to providing a payment in lieu of tax for rent restricted properties.
Or
Right.
or a process.
Right, or a process, right. And that it is very helpful as a developer coming into a jurisdiction when as a matter of, really entitlement, that you're going to have this relief on the payment of real estate taxes because oftentimes when affordable housing is developed, it's done so under a for-profit entity structure. Particularly when it's making use as low-income housing tax credits as the financing, it needs to be a for-profit structure, and therefore it's subject to full tax payment, even though it's only able to collect a reduced rent as a result of the restrictions on the rent amounts. So, I think if the city could develop a formalized process and policy, it would be very helpful, and I think it would help facilitate development in the city. And as we know, that we included that idea as part of our overall formal recommendation.
Yeah, and the task force also included that after much gnashing of teeth. Because there was a whole group of people who said, "Oh no, you should never have payment in lieu of taxes," but that's another story.
Okay.
It was very weird.
Clearly,
It
they
was a
haven't
very
owned,
weird discussion.
clearly they haven't owned affordable housing properties and having had the
Yeah, I know.
financial issue.
I know. But Teresa, I also saw that you have it as one of your tasks on the Cdbg, whatever that is, the grid that you sent us.
The Annapolis Fair Housing Action Plan.
Yeah.
Was.
Yes, and
You're
it
hoping to have that policy
It's in
developed.
both places, right?
yeah. So that
Right.
is one of
So
the
there
actions.
seems to be
items for that.
There seems to be a feeling that we ought to be doing this. So
Well, the thing that's very, since I've been with the city, we've pretty much always approved pilots, but it's always, it's just so informal and there's no system to it and there's no decision about how much the pilot's going to be. And then they got into this whole thing where they would send it to ACDS to do some sort of evaluation, and they charge the developer for that,
Right.
and it just, I felt kind of got away from,
Yeah, it'd be best to have.
nice to have a process and a policy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be good.
I mean, it could be variable based on the percentage of the units that are affordable or whatever the case is. So there's still some flexibility as to, how it gets structured, but it'd be good to have something in writing.
So, yeah, and so that, I guess that's kind of where I was going with this, thinking that as a sort of step towards, coming up with some ideas to do some research about, what pilots are in place in other jurisdictions and kind of what those terms are and what they look like. And I do have some of that information. I've gathered some of that information, thanks to Teresa, gathered some of that information. And I thought if we could just all kind of collect whatever we may know about other jurisdictions, and then we could pull it together and, just see what others are doing, and then
Yeah.
figure out what we think would work best.
And of course, there's always, the housing authority was the first entity to have pilots. All housing authorities have
Mm.
pilots. I don't know what it is in Annapolis, but
Yeah,
they've been doing it for years.
Under the cooperation agreements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they all have what we could find.
right. All the housing authorities have always had that.
So Kathy, when you looked at that material that I sent you, did you notice if any of the jurisdictions had specific dollar amounts or percentages, or how many in Maryland actually had a policy?
Well, and the list that you sent, I don't think was inclusive of everywhere in Maryland. It was,
It's old. Nancy
yeah,
raced it.
it's old. Yeah, yeah.
Well, so we know
Yeah.
how long ago that was.
Yeah, the state passed a law a few years back though for affordable housing too, for reduction in property taxes, if I recall right. Kathy may know better than me since wasn't developing in Maryland at the time, but.
Well, yeah, the state has authorizing legislation that allows jurisdictions to,
Oh, for jurisdictions to do it. I
Yeah,
thought it was a state.
yes,
All
right. And Anne Arundel, I did confirm with Kathy Koch that Anne Arundel County does not have a written policy.
No, they don't.
I didn't
Yeah.
think it did.
But it's pre-cooked one, it's the same term each time. They've been using the same term, over and over again, but it's just not written down anywhere.
Kathy, wasn't that one of her goals though, in that strategy is to create a policy so there'd be certainty about it? She talked about that too in her presentation.
Yeah, now that you say that, I think that might be the case, yeah. So okay, yeah, I just thought we could kind of go to our separate corners and come up with whatever information we can, and then pull it all together and then take a look at it and maybe discuss it at the next meeting, kind of the results of what we found and what we think might work. Does that sound like a plan?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we're moving along here. So this Annapolis Fair Housing Action Plan, let me pull that up, since I'm becoming such a pro at doing this. Okay, all right. So, Teresa, yeah, I guess it makes sense for you to kind of walk us through this.
Okay, well, basically what this is a result of is the analysis of impediments to fair housing that each jurisdiction has to do every 5 years, along with its consolidated plan. So this year, the city joined in with the Baltimore Metropolitan Council with a number of jurisdictions, Howard County, Baltimore City, Hertford County, and joined, and we did a combined analysis of impediments, and then we did separate ones for each jurisdiction. So there's a kind of a group set, and then there's an individual jurisdiction set. And basically what I did was I looked through all our old AIs, analysis of impediments, to see what was recommended and what we accomplished and what we hadn't accomplished, and then put together this document that says what it is that we need to do. And it's just a compilation of all the stuff that we hadn't done over the years that was recommended. So there's basically 4 goals. And the first goal is to expand fair housing resources and compliance. And then under that, there's a list of different things that I'll go over. The second goal was we wanted to expand fair housing choice for persons with disabilities. And under that, there was a number of things that we wanted to do. And then we wanted to increase rental housing options. And then the last thing was to increase home ownership opportunities for unrepresented households. So those are the things that we wanted to do. So Kathy and I talked about there might be a number of these metrics or things that we'd like to do that the commission, our housing commission, and the Department of Planning and Zoning could do together, work on together. Some of them have already been done. So under the first goal, which is expanding the fair housing resources and compliance, we basically said that there's a lack of education about fair housing in the city. And we'd like to devise a fair housing handbook. Now, we have a fair housing brochure, but it's not really a handbook. And the Human Relations Commission said that since fair housing comes under the Human Relations Commission, that they would like to work on that, but they don't have resources. It's just a commission like your commission, and it has no staff. So my guess is this is going to be kind of a staff thing with a presentation for review to the 2 groups. And Kathy, refresh my memory as I go through these, which ones you said that you would thought this commission could.
Yeah, well, what we had talked about was anything that is showing the responsible party being the Department of Planning and Zoning.
Planning and zoning, yeah.
Right, which
So that
which
would be
actually is the first one, or the book, because I'm part of the Department of Planning and Zoning, so it would come under me. The second one, they're listed, prepare and disseminate a fair housing brochure for landlords. We did that. We got that done. So that's off the table. On the next one, the city has developed a limited proficiency plan, but they haven't decided yet how they're going to go about implementing it. It was supposed to come out of the office of the mayor, but now it looks like it's coming out of the office of the city manager. But at this point, nothing's started. The handbook for housing choice voucher holders on source of income discrimination. The city of Annapolis is one of the few, for a while was one of the few jurisdictions that had source of income as a protected class. And a lot of people don't know that still. And a lot of even the folks that are taking their housing choice vouchers out to find places to live they don't know it. The landlords, don't really know it. So I found this wonderful booklet developed by HUD that we could redo and do for us. So that would be one of the ones that would come under the group. And here's the next one is the revise the city zoning code to affirmatively further fair housing. And I think that's where you guys come in under reviewing ordinances and zoning regulations for compliance with fair housing. We tried back when to just get rid of the definition of family. I mean, our definition of family is so archaic. I mean, theoretically, nobody from St. John's could share an apartment if they really, you know, implemented this. So that's a bit, that is a big one. We weren't successful in getting rid of it. There's not a whole lot of, you don't see a whole lot of activity around fair housing that much in the city. I think some of it's because, you know, I think we do a pretty good job of providing a lot of affordable housing. So, but we really need to change. We need to make some changes here. So that would be one that you guys, I could really use your help on that. The next one is increased rental housing options, and that's where the pilot comes in. And the other thing that we talked about is to continue supporting the rehabilitation of existing housing units, and also we also have the Housing Assistance Trust Fund that used to be funded by payments in lieu of providing an MPU, and of course we got rid of that, so that there's no funding source for that program anymore. So that's something that I'd like to look into. And then the last one is increasing ownership opportunity for unrepresented households. We have a real problem with lending in Annapolis. Our African-American community gets turned down, has a high rate of turn down. And the other thing I noticed, and I was talking to ACDS about this too, is all the folks that go through the home buyers program and the folks that go through our MPDU program, rarely, it's mostly white people that end up buying the properties. It's rare for a Black family to make it through it and to become a homeowner. And so that's something that we really need to work on and devise some sort of a program. So those are basically, that's basically it on fair housing. So I don't know if you want to talk about some of these, or.
I mean, is there a burning desire to tackle one first as opposed to the others?
We're already doing the pilot one, so.
That's true. Give ourselves a pat on the back for that.
The pilot and the zoning stuff, really,
Does the ADUs fit in here anyplace?
probably in the zoning stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, if you really want to meet these deadlines, I mean, there's some specific deadlines here.
oh, absolutely.
Far into the future for most of them.
I did that because I knew that we didn't have any staff or resources to do a lot of this stuff.
Like for example, this was the source of income.
That'll be fair. That'd be me. I can do that. I mean,
by 2023, right?
yeah, no, that.
So I guess the question for you, Teresa, is what do you need help with?
I need help with the pilot, and I need help with all the zoning stuff.
Okay.
That's what I need help with. The rest of it, I can, you know, the handbook, I can, you know, I can do that. I can, you know, the source of income thing I can do. It's really all of the zoning changes that we need, and the pilot.
So you're talking about these three, these number two.
We're talking about under number one, Yeah, I'm sorry. I
Number
could-
two.
Under two, yeah, under
Right.
number two.
So you're talking about this group home, regulation of group homes
Mm-hmm.
and regulations relative to, persons with disabilities.
Right.
These two.
And then under the number three, it would be the pilot.
The pilot, right, okay.
And once I get my staff person on board through the consent order, we agreed that we would hire another staff person. I'll be able to take care of some of those things like, developing a program to increase home ownership, those types of things.
So the housing assistance fund, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the Housing Assistance Trust Fund,
Trust fund.
basically what we've been using it for is to augment our housing rehabilitation program. Because we didn't really have enough money in CDBG. The last 2 years in CDBG, we really needed to give money to the Housing Authority. So, we, and also ACDS runs our housing rehabilitation program, and they were lagging behind in, because of COVID and other things, lagging behind in spending the money. So there wasn't any point in giving them any more money. They already had our whole entitlement allocation in money. But in previous years, when we had more, we would have like, okay, so it takes about $60,000 to do a house. We only get a couple $100,000 in CDBG money, so we were allocating 120 to the housing rehabilitation program, and then allocating certain amount of money for advisory services for ACDS to pay.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, Teresa, wait a minute. So let me stop you there for a second, because before we get into CDBG, I was referring to what the MPDU fee in lieu was.
Well, that's where I was going.
Okay, but there is a new source for that now. Isn't there the hotel tax?
No, that's to fund rental assistance.
The hotel
Specifically
tax.
rental assistance.
Oh, and that's going
It's gonna be
into-
separate. It'll be a separate pot of money within the trust fund.
Got it. Okay, so the trust fund itself still has no source of funds then.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify my understanding. Okay.
So, anyway, so we use it for our housing rehabilitation program, and we use it for, Homes at the Glen right now. We're using it for, settlement expenses. I would really like to have a settlement expense program. There's still some money in there where we can provide settlement expenses to people other than, just, Homes at the Glen people. I tried to work out a program with ACDS, but I couldn't quite work it out. So I'm going to wait a little while. But it would be nice to have a revenue source for that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the bottom line is you really are needing help specifically with these two goals, number two. And so we'll talk more about how to go about attacking that. Okay. All right.
Because one of the things it does say in the code is that this committee look at fair housing issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, unless there's no other questions about that, we can move on to the CDBG topic.
So what do you want to do first?
So, yeah, I'm going to pull up the, where is it? Okay, let me see. I don't know that I'm seeing it.
What, the flow chart or the chart that has
Yeah,
how
the
allocation?
chart of the money, yeah.
Oh,
Um, hold on a second. I think I have it here.
that should be it.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so with CDBG, we thought we'd talk first about, because obviously, Teresa is well into the FY22 round. And so, Teresa, I guess if we could just kind of talk more globally about this commission's involvement in CDBG, which is going to be new. And we outlined a process for us going forward, but then we also wanted to review kind of where the money is right now. So which one do you want to do first? Because I could pull up the other one too.
It doesn't matter. It's up to you. I mean, we
All
could.
right. Well, let's do where the money is now. Let's do where the money is now.
So as everybody knows, except for Pat, you haven't been involved, but the rest of the committee has. We would get a entitlement allocation of CDBG money, and we request applications, and folks would, and the amount of money that each group got was basically determined by me in terms of I'd make a staff recommendation, and then it would go to the committee, this Housing and Community Development Committee, which was a committee before this committee, which had 3 aldermen on it. And then it would go to City Council for approval. So at any point in time, whatever I recommended, if the aldermen didn't like it, they could cross it out and put what they wanted in there. And the same with the City Council. But the city attorney determined that that was an administrative function and couldn't be done by aldermen. And to make a long story short, the aldermen aren't on the committee anymore. It's now a citizens committee. And now we have to decide what your role is going to be in this whole process. And so Kathy and I talked about what the role is. If you look in the code again, it says that this committee reviews. It doesn't say, it just says reviews. It doesn't say recommends. It doesn't say anything. It just says reviews. So, so what we did was we came up with a flow chart that basically almost identical to what happened in the past. With the exception of, well, I'll go through it. So I developed an application for the upcoming round, which will start in October, and the money will not be available until July of next year. So it's our fiscal year 2023.
Teresa, you want me to bring up the flow chart then? You want me to do that? I thought we were going to go through the money.
Okay, we can go through the money.
Can everybody see that on their screen? Do you see the money?
So this is
Okay.
this year's money.
Yes.
Yeah, this year's money. So it totals 303,352, right?
Right.
And
And
a
everybody
cit-
got a chance to look at all the projects and got a chance to read what each one was, because I sent everybody a copy of the description of each one.
And what percentage goes to capital projects again?
So the way that it works is we're restricted to 15% of the money going to what we call public services or operations. And we're restricted to 20% going to administration. So the rest of the money, which is 65% of the money, goes to capital projects. Community development block grant is a capital program. It's really not a public service program. There's a whole public service block grant program. So so the majority of the money has to be spent on bricks and mortar. Although the demand is highest in
Right.
in the public service category. So you can see, a list of the organizations that applied. Basically, it's the same organizations every year, Patrick. It's the same groups, because the money's restricted to organizations that help low and moderate income people. So these are the organizations that help low and moderate income people. Did you want me to go through each one or just
No, it's fine. Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, it is interesting though that the demand is on the service side, whereas the money really needs to be used on the capital side. So you have the sort of imbalance between the supply and the demand. But
So typically on our capital projects, money will go to organizations like Arundel Lodge and ARC who serve the disabled to fix up their properties. There's not a lot of money out there for them to fix up their properties. So we help them out. And like I said, we've been helping the Housing Authority lately with so that's why you see under housing rehabilitation, there isn't any money there.
I'll just say as a past member, the nice thing about the capital projects, everybody asks for more money they can get, except in the capital projects, because they usually get what they ask for because we have the money.
Right,
That's
except
a nice thing.
except for this year, because this year the Housing Authority asked for $100,000 for the Robinwood HVAC. But we took out money for administration, 20%, which we typically don't do. But we're going to start doing it now because we have that staff person
Yeah.
we had to hire. So that money all would have gone to, the Housing Authority would have gotten close to their $100,000 if we hadn't done that.
okay, so Pat, any questions about that since you're the new kid on the block when it comes to CDBG?
I read all,
Annapolis CDBG. You know CDBG. This is Annapolis CDBG. All right.
know a lot of the organizations and I read the description, so I'm fine.
All right, let me see. Wait a minute. So now here's the flow chart, which I gotta say, I'm very proud of myself
You
for
should be.
creating this flow chart.
Nice
I
job.
figured how to do this in Word. Oh my gosh. So this is, and Terry and Nancy, this is, really what is going to be a brand new process here. So
Yeah.
very interested in your input. So Teresa, why don't you just walk through it?
So it is, so basically in October, what I do is I distribute the guidelines and the applications. And I haven't sent you the application yet. I've got to finish it up, but it'll go out in the middle of October. The city is required by HUD to hold public hearings in relation to its distribution of CDBG funds. So our first public hearing would be in November, and the commission would hold the public hearing. And in that public hearing, we talk about our past performance and what our needs are. So there's a problem with our November meeting because it's on Thanksgiving. So I've requested Hillary for another date for that meeting because we can't have it on Thanksgiving. So we would listen to what people had to say about needs and we talk about our past performance. That's a requirement. So in December, I would get all the applications. They're due, I think it's the first week or the second week in December. And I would review them for completeness and eligibility. There's like a 30-some page checklist that you have to go through for HUD that, you have to look at threshold. You have to look at they meet the low and moderate income requirements. And that takes me about, a few weeks to go through all of them. So I'll do that in December, and then in January, I will distribute copies of the applications to the committee. Now this is still the same. So in February, the applicants would come like they did before to the other committee, come before the committee and make their presentations. And then once they made their presentations in March, I would come back to this commission and I would present my recommendation and review them. I would ask for your input, not for your vote like we did before. And then those recommendations would be put in something called an action plan. We have to do an action plan every year, and those recommendations go in the action plan. And HUD requires that we have a public hearing on the action plan. So the commission would hold the public hearing on the action plan. And then once this is all finalized, it goes to city council as part of the budget process. And then it gets approved, and then we finish it up and send it off to HUD.
Perfect.
HUD has 45 days to review it. And they typically they will approve it by July 1, which is when our program year starts. However, we've had in past years when we've had a problem with Congress passing the budget and all this that's going to go on coming up. We haven't gotten our allocation, and it's kind of everything kind of got pushed. So, but this is how it would work if everything goes according to plan. Now,
It looked a lot like the old.
it is.
system.
It is, and this is what Kathy and I talked about is like, does the committee want to? In the code it says that you review projects. It just says projects. It doesn't say Cdbg. It just says housing and community development projects. So,
I think it's an improvement because we spent a lot of time discussing, and not to say anything negative, but over $1,000 here, $1,000 there.
Right.
It was a lot of time that I didn't think was well worth it sometimes. So I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me at least.
right. Yeah, because what would happen would be I'd do my recommendations, and then one of the aldermen would come in with a totally different
rather do
set of
this.
recommendations.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah, and
is that what you guys are planning? Are you just gonna, you have to think about how this is all gonna work, because it's a little bit different. I wouldn't expect that you would come in with a separate set of your own recommendations.
right. I mean, I guess the way I was envisioning it is you would be able to send to us in advance what those recommendations are, and then we would discuss it at the meeting and react to it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, and the major difference is we're not going to nickel and dime you or make, recommendation. We're not going to vote on things and make recommendations. We're going to simply look at what you've done, Teresa, and
Right.
essentially
go with it.
Right. It's my understanding from reading what the city attorney wrote is that at some point I would take my recommendations up my chain of command, which is to Sally, then the mayor. That's my chain of command. And that's actually the way we did it.
Yeah.
We did it when I first came to Annapolis. We always went to the mayor with them. And then somebody got all bent out of shape and thought, the mayor shouldn't have a say. And then, not to offend anybody, the mayor decided that they weren't going to get involved in it. And, but anyway. So my question is do you still want all these folks to come in and make their presentations to you?
Well, how else would you have a public hearing if we didn't?
I'm having the public hearing in November and April. That
Yeah.
wouldn't,
Right. No,
that wouldn't be a public hearing.
oh, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't count as a public hearing.
It used to, but it wouldn't
Oh.
anymore.
Well,
Okay.
I like not having them come in because with all due respect, we oftentimes hear the same thing year after
Yeah,
year.
exactly.
It wasn't
exactly.
worth much value. That's all, yeah.
We can
Although-
have new ones come in.
That's true. I mean, and I'm just one voice. Other people might think differently, but
No, I agree with you, Terry. Unless it's somebody that we've never that that you've never funded before. I mean, if it's somebody totally new, I think maybe it would be worthwhile. But other than that,
That would make sense.
Pat, what are your thoughts?
No, that makes sense. I mean, most of these are, particularly the ones that are like operating funds to do what they've been doing, or just, some of them pretty simple, like preparing a group home or something along those lines. But the new people would be good to hear from.
So every capital request is going to be unique, but the request for operating services really just pertains to, it's always going to be a description of the organization itself, right? Not something specific that they're doing.
Well, yeah, sometimes they'll change the name of it, or the focus of where they're, like, for example, that the Lighthouse Shelter uses the money for case management. It doesn't really use the money for the shelter. It used the money for the shelter, but so it would be things like that they would change.
So I guess what I was thinking was maybe it's new applicants for the service related funds, but on the capital funds, since it's specific, it's project specific, that we hear that.
Well, like typically Arundel Lodge always does the same thing. They use the money to upgrade their properties. HACA does the same. HACA's upgrade properties. Pat can't vote or have anything.
Right, he's
recuse
recused.
himself for the whole thing.
Right.
So unless we got something new for a capital project, like say, for example, Homes for America did a capital project when they fixed up Bay Forest Senior Apartments. That's not something that they do every year, like Arundel Lodge. So that would be new anyway. I can't imagine Arundel Lodge doing anything new. I can't imagine the Housing Authority doing anything.
Were you planning on sending us the PDFs of their applications?
Yeah, if you want them, yes.
What I'm saying, because that would have everything in writing and you can
Right.
read it, and that might help people come up with questions, or actually maybe even say, I want this group to come and explain more about this project if
That's
we
true.
wanted that. That
Right.
would be better use of our time and the applicant's time, because I kind of feel sorry for them sometimes, because they are made to come every year and kind of do the same thing. So be better use of everybody's time, maybe.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you get the application, I mean, I'll distribute the applications the first part of January. You have January to look at them, and your February meeting isn't until toward the end of the month. So if you read them all in January and the first part of February, you tell me who you want to come in, then I can just ask those people to come in.
Yeah.
That
And we
makes
won't have everybody. We won't have
Yeah.
everybody come in.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. So based on our written, we're going to have all the applications in writing, and based upon our review, if we have questions and we want them to come in, we'll ask them to come in.
Yep.
Okay. All right, and this, given that this is going to be new this year, obviously we can always tweak this, as we go
Mhm.
along. We think
Right.
that we should do something a little differently, or next time around we'll do something else, and we'll do that.
Right.
So,
We've got
Okay.
two things on CDBG. One, I already mentioned to Kathy, is I'll probably end up also having to recuse myself on Lighthouse stuff. So
Oh.
my wife's a board member.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
But the other one is that I did see the application. I think you sent that out to us, Teresa.
Oh, did I? I can't remember.
Yeah. And one of the things I saw was the eligible applicants said nonprofits. It didn't say anything about housing authorities.
It didn't, but there's no prohibition for us to fund housing authorities.
Okay.
Hopefully, because,
Yeah. Since you did.
because we have been for years now, and HUD's never brought that up as a problem, so.
Well, for the nonprofit, we can do it that way.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly.
So,
And Teresa, you're taking comments on that application. If, Pat, if you see anything else, let Teresa know. Right, Teresa, you're still working on
Yeah.
it, still in draft form.
Yeah,
right?
I found a couple, like typos and stuff like
Yeah.
that, so. Kathy, you said you found,
Yeah, right. And then I think
just-
we were talking about the timeline in there, then we need to
right,
adjust
well, I have
that.
to redo that, so
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah,
And I don't even have to put that in there, to be honest with you. I mean,
yeah.
some jurisdictions don't put that in there,
Mhm.
but, I'll tweak that a little bit.
Okay,
So is there anything else on CDBG?
so, in terms of our next meeting, so November, you're trying to get rescheduled,
Trying to
And
get
that
it
will be-
rescheduled, and that'll be a public hearing.
public hearing. So that meeting agenda will be that public hearing.
Well,
Pretty
it'll be the part of the public hearing will be talking about progress. That'll be the annual report that I'll be sending you all at the end of next week. And just what our accomplishments were. And then we talk about, and then we ask the audience, if there is one, what they see the needs are. Similar to what Kathy Koch's group did, although they bring everybody in. And that's it. So you have the rest of the meeting time to work on, the pilot and all that stuff.
Okay,
But my guess is nobody's gonna pop up.
okay.
So you can put other things on the agenda that'll take up maybe the first 10 minutes of that.
Okay. So in terms of our future meeting, then we got October, we got November, so we do have this piece we need to do on November. And do we meet in December, Teresa, usually?
We usually do, but since they've changed our meeting date, it looks like it falls and probably end up falling on Christmas. It would be Christmas Eve, so no, we wouldn't be having a December meeting.
Okay, yeah,
Unless you guys want to have
Yeah.
want to have a meeting and I can get that one rescheduled.
yeah. Well, let's see how October goes. But, okay, so we talked about inviting Melissa to, I guess, Pat, that would be either the October or November meeting. It sounds like there'd be time for Melissa even in November meeting with the public
I'd like to
hearing.
make a suggestion and
Yep.
only ask her after we know about choice neighborhoods. Because
Okay, so.
because
what-
things are going to change depending on whether it gets funded or not.
Right. Right.
Although,
I mean, because that's a
Although
huge
her-
amount of money.
we're gonna talk
yeah,
about
but her view of the, her
Well-
view of the corporation doesn't change, other than the fact that if you get choice neighborhoods, it actually will probably have some money to work with. So I'm
Well-
not sure that it matters whether choice neighborhoods has been approved in
Well,
October.
I think it would be nice to hear about choice neighborhoods from her.
Yeah, no, we should
So,
hear about
and
it.
I don't, yeah, and
Sure.
I don't want to have her come back twice.
Well,
So
true.
So if we could just wait to hear, wait for the meeting after we
Mhm.
know about choice neighborhoods, then we could kill two birds with one stone.
It should be soon, right? I mean,
Late September,
July was
early October. We were thinking October.
okay.
usually before elections. Federal government likes to do that too.
Well,
Yeah.
except there are no federal elections going on, so.
Okay, so then we're really, I guess we're gonna be in the meantime, focusing our efforts on the pilot.
Pilot.
research and, we could just, again, if we could just, maybe between now and the next meeting in October, if you could send me whatever research you have, and I'll share with you what Teresa gave me, and hopefully I'm going to add to it too, Teresa.
And I think I did some other research other than what Nancy did a little bit more recently. So I'll look and see what
And then I'll pull it all together into one kind of spreadsheet, and then we can take a look at it and, have that conversation. So. Okay,
Okay.
does that work?
Yes, it does.
Yep.
All right, anything else?
Oh, just one more thing. Your recommendations to the city count, that went, your recommendations on the consent order. We're not finished with that, are we?
What do you mean?
Well, we need to hear their reaction to it.
Yeah, we're kind of trying to figure out that part. We're trying to figure out whether or not we need to go in front of the Housing and Health, Alderman Gay's committee, the Housing Committee, or instead, or do we go right to a working session of the City Council? So Sally Nash is trying to figure out kind of the next step with that. So I'd sent that, I copied you on my email to the city attorney, and I hadn't heard anything back.
I haven't heard anything back from Joelle. I called him and I haven't heard.
So I hadn't heard anything back from that email until like this week when, Dr. Nash got in touch about kind of figuring out next steps. So once we figure out what we're doing, I will be sure and let you know. So that's kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah, it'll either go before Housing and Human Welfare first, or it'll go directly to City Council. And that won't be until November. Probably.
So, all right, anything else? If not, how about a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
And if there's a second, and all